of NATO airspace. The alliance is due to hold talks early next week after Russian military jets entered alliance member Estonia's airspace.
In the early hours of a cold autumn morning, the skies over Europe told a story of danger, defiance, and rising tension. Poland scrambled its fighter aircraft. NATO intercepted Russian MiG-31s violating Estonian airspace. Hundreds of drones and missiles rained down on Ukraine. At the very same time, Scotland's political establishment was shaken by a resignation scandal. Its centuries-old legal system saw a fundamental reform, and Britain and Ireland prepared to confront the painful legacy of the Troubles once again. Tonight, we piece together a continent on edge, a Europe facing the specter of war abroad and divisions, reforms, and reckonings at home. This is Great Britain. Welcome to Great Britain. If you are new here, do subscribe, like, and share. Your support helps us bring you balanced, in-depth reporting on the most important stories shaping Britain, Europe, and the wider world. In this report, we take you inside one of the most dramatic weeks in European politics and security this year. From Russia's escalating military aggression and NATO's urgent response, to Scottish political turbulence, legal reforms that changed centuries of tradition, and a renewed Anglo-Irish effort to reckon with the Troubles. This is a story that connects the battlefield to the courtroom, the skies over Eastern Europe to the corridors of Holyrood and Westminster. This is not just a series of isolated headlines. It is a narrative about how Europe is being reshaped by war, by politics, by law, and by history itself. It began with a familiar yet terrifying pattern. Air raid sirens wailing across Ukraine. Radar screens lit up with hostile signatures. The Ukrainian Air Force, stretched but defiant, warning of incoming barges. In the small hours of Saturday morning, Russia unleashed a massive attack of around 40 missiles and 580 drones across Ukraine. This was not an operation targeting only military facilities. It was a strategy of terror. Missiles and drones directed at civilian infrastructure, at energy grids, and at homes. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky condemned the assault as outrageous, and he was right to emphasize that each strike was a deliberate attempt not only to weaken Ukraine's resilience, but to test the resolve of its allies. The danger was not limited to Ukrainian soil. Several Russian missiles veered dangerously close to the Polish border. For Poland, a NATO member state, this was a line that could not be ignored. At 3:40 a.m. British time, Polish and Allied aircraft scrambled into the skies. Air defense and radar systems were raised to their highest state of readiness. The mission was clear: secure Polish airspace at any cost. By 5 a.m., the immediate danger had subsided. Russian strikes had halted, and the operation ended. But the signal was clear. Russia was willing to test NATO's eastern flank, to raise the risk of miscalculation, and to keep the entire region on constant alert. Poland's quick mobilization was not only about defending its skies. It was about deterrence. It was about signaling to Moscow, a line exists, and if you cross it, the consequences could be catastrophic. This was not just another night of war in Ukraine. It was a reminder of how close the war edges to NATO's borders every single day. If Poland's scramble was dramatic, what happened next was incendiary. On Friday morning, 3 Russian MiG-31 fighter jets were tracked entering Estonian airspace near Vainluu Island in the Gulf of Finland. Their transponders were off. They had no flight plans. They were not communicating with air traffic control. This was not an accident. This was not routine. This was a deliberate violation of a NATO member's sovereign airspace. Italian F-35s, operating from Estonia's Amari Air Base as part of NATO's Baltic Air Policing mission, intercepted the Russian jets. The encounter lasted around 12 tense minutes before the MiGs turned back. Estonia's defense forces called it brazen. Foreign Minister Margus Tsahkna noted that Russia had already violated Estonia's airspace 4 times this year, but never with this level of audacity. Tallinn wasted no time. Russia's charge d'affaires was summoned. NATO consultations under Article 4 of the alliance's treaty were requested. And across Europe, leaders condemned what the EU's foreign policy chief, Kaja Kallas, described as an extremely dangerous provocation. European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen went further. Europe stands with Estonia, and we will respond to every provocation with determination. This was not just rhetoric. EU leaders were already preparing their 19th package of sanctions against Moscow. Now, the incursion over Estonia added urgency and unity to the White House. Former President Donald Trump, now once again a central political figure in America, admitted he didn't love it, a typically understated remark, but one that hinted at the broader anxiety within Washington about how easily such incidents could spiral. For NATO, the incursion reaffirmed what has long been feared. Russia is probing, testing, pushing boundaries. Each violation is both a message and a risk. A message that Moscow does not recognize NATO's authority, and a risk that one miscalculation could ignite a direct confrontation. The violations, the strikes, the scrambling of jets, these are not isolated incidents. They are part of a broader Russian strategy of escalation. By overflying Polish territory with drones, by sending fighters into Estonian airspace, Moscow is not seeking immediate military victory. It is seeking psychological dominance. It is testing NATO's resolve. But the European response is firming. The EU is accelerating sanctions. NATO is reinforcing air policing missions. And member states like Poland and Estonia are pushing their allies to take stronger positions. This is Europe under pressure. And as Ursula von der Leyen put it, as threats escalate, so will our pressure. While Europe confronted Moscow, Scotland confronted its own drama. Jamie Hepburn, the Scottish Minister for Parliamentary Business, abruptly resigned after an altercation with former Conservative leader Douglas Ross. The confrontation, reportedly sparked by a dispute over government inaction against aggressive seagulls, yes, seagulls, escalated into accusations of assault. Ross alleged Hepburn grabbed his shoulder and subjected him to verbal abuse. Though Hepburn denied assault, he admitted his language was aggressive and out of character. The political fallout was swift. First Minister John Swinney defended him at first, but the pressure was undeniable. Hepburn resigned, expressing regret that his 11 years in government ended in this fashion. The resignation was more than a personal embarrassment. It symbolized the Scottish political scene already fraught with tension, personality clashes, and questions of credibility. For the SNP, it was yet another moment of distraction at a time when unity is needed most. From politics, we turn to law, and here, history was made. The Scottish Parliament voted to abolish the not-proven verdict, a centuries-old legal peculiarity that stood alongside guilty and not guilty. The verdict, which acquitted the accused but without fully clearing their name, has long been controversial. Critics argued it confused juries, undermined convictions in serious cases, and left victims without closure. Now it is gone. Justice Secretary Angela Constance called the reform a step toward a modern and fair justice system. Campaigners for survivors of sexual assault hailed it as a victory, noting that in 2022 to 23, the not-proven verdict accounted for 61% of rape acquittals, a figure far higher than for other crimes. The abolition also comes with other reforms: a requirement for 2/3 jury majorities for conviction, the establishment of a specialist sexual offenses court, and lifelong anonymity protections for rape complainants. But critics remain. The Law Society of Scotland has warned that removing not proven could cheapen the guilty verdict. Opposition parties complain that the reforms are half-baked. Nonetheless, Scotland has crossed a Rubicon. A legal tradition that survived for centuries has been scrapped, and the consequences will echo for years to come. Finally, to Northern Ireland. The British and Irish governments announced new joint proposals to deal with the legacy of the Troubles. This comes after years of disputes and after the Conservative government's controversial Legacy Act of 2023, which granted broad amnesties to former combatants. The new framework, developed after a reset in Anglo-Irish relations under Keir Starmer and Taoiseach Michael Martin, aims to overhaul the system entirely. At its heart will be a new legacy commission, with stronger powers to investigate Troubles-era crimes and with a mandate to be compliant with the European Convention on Human Rights. For Dublin, this is essential. Ireland still has a case pending against the UK at the European Court of Human Rights. For London, it is a chance to rebuild trust with victims groups who felt abandoned by the 2023 Act. But not everyone is on board. Veterans organizations fear a witch hunt against elderly soldiers for actions in the 1970s. Figures such as Lord Dannatt, former head of the British Army, insist that it is unacceptable to drag men in their 70s and 80s into new investigations decades later. This is the eternal dilemma of the Troubles: how to reconcile justice with peace, truth with reconciliation, history with the present. The joint framework does not resolve every question, but it represents a shift away from unilateralism toward cooperation, toward a recognition that the ghosts of Northern Ireland's past can only be faced together. So what do we make of all this? On the Eastern Front, Russia escalates. NATO responds. Poland scrambles jets. Estonia intercepts fighters. Sanctions tighten, and the line between provocation and war grows thinner. At home, Scotland sees political resignation and legal revolution. Northern Ireland faces its past once again. The connecting thread is pressure. Pressure on Europe's borders. Pressure within its politics. Pressure on its institutions, its history, its very identity. For Britain, these stories are not distant. They are immediate, because Britain sits at the heart of this European drama. As a NATO member, as a neighbor of Ireland, as a nation wrestling with its own political and legal evolution. The choices made now, in Brussels, in Warsaw, in Tallinn, in Edinburgh, in Belfast, in London, will shape not just today's headlines, but the future of the continent. This has been Great Britain, a Europe on edge, a continent under strain, and a nation, our nation, at the crossroads of history once again. If you found this report valuable, please like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell. Your support allows us to continue providing long-form, serious analysis at a time when attention spans are shrinking, but the stakes could not be higher. Stay informed, stay engaged, and as always, thank you for watching.